Greetings Sagittarius, and a warm welcome to your in-depth year 2024 astrology and horoscope forecast for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm just going to briefly outline how I'm going to structure the video. In October 2023 we have two eclipses. The first, a solar eclipse on the 14th, the second, a lunar eclipse on the 28th. And they're going to provide a background energy which feeds into the first quarter of the new year. So we just need to check out what they're about, specifically from the perspective of your sign. But then, as the new year dawns, we take a snapshot of where all the planets are, and that gives you your solar return, which will be influential for the following 12 months. Now, there's 3 planets in your sign, so that's really intriguing, so I can't wait to share that information with you. But then, this is a year that continues to see Saturn, the planet of structure, but sometimes of limitation, in your sector of emotions, along with Neptune, the most dreamy influence of the heavens. So we need to just check out them. Also, Pluto returns to your sector of everyday communications on the 21st of January. It's going to be there for in excess of 30 weeks this year. Last year it was just 11 weeks. So it's going to be a lot more influential. But also we need to be mindful of where the nodal axis is, because for you it's truly exciting, because the North Node, our direction of travel collectively, is in house 5, your sister fire sign of Aries. And that gives you a lot of opportunities to manifest your talents, flair, but also perhaps have some expectation around your social situation and also perhaps your love life. Now, also in that sector we have Chiron, and Chiron and the North Node do meet up at the end of February, so I need to share that with you. But what about the eclipses in year 2024? Well, we do have a solar eclipse in that 5th house in Aries too, so that's really something to look forward to telling you about. But we have 2 in your 11th house, which is the sign of Libra, very much how you connect to others, your network, your friendships, but also your longer term plan. One of these is a lunar eclipse, so there could be a bit of a challenge towards the end of March, but then in October we have a solar eclipse which takes you through to the end of the year. But also we have a new eclipse series starting in September, and for you it's in a very tender part of your situation and very close also to Neptune. Now, your ruler Jupiter continues in the part of your situation to do with health, work and fitness right through to the 26th of May, but then it moves into your sector of relationships, where it's going to be for the rest of the year. But also Venus and Mars are giving you loads of support this year when it comes to your love life, but also those relationships too, so that's exciting. But there are 4 lots of fire mercury retrogrades this year, and 2 of them are in your sign. You start the year with a Mercury retrograde, you end it with a Mercury retrograde. So that's intriguing. I'm going to be showing you the importance of Mercury in retrograde in fire signs. It does have one brief spell in the sign of Virgo in an earth sign, but otherwise it is a fire sign year for Mercury. And fire is very much about passion. So how are your passions going to play out with this potential challenge? And then, as we get towards the end of the year, Mars, the planet of daring and also of initiative, is going to be moving into the part of your situation to do with expansion and being much more independent minded, which is very much in keeping with your sign. But it does go into a retrograde in December along with Mercury in your sign. So a lot to share with you. Please stay with me as I go through all of this in detail. I'd just like to share with you a very special opportunity. If you're watching this video in year 2023, you can order your year 2024 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data, and I will prepare for you the rest of year 2023 free of charge. If you're ordering within year 2024, you will get a full 12 months from the exact time of your order. You will also, my special package, get 30% off and your character analysis report, your life roadmap. This will help you to understand the patterns that have repeated themselves in your situation, help you to seize upon the opportunities and get a much more intimate understanding of some of the challenges and how you can work with them future forwards in a more effective way. Please see beneath this video for more information. So Sagittarius, let's unpack those two eclipses in October 23 to begin with. The first is a solar eclipse in your sector of friendship, fraternity, networking, long-term plans and highest hopes. So it's really positive. It's also very close to the South Node, which is a karmic influence, encouraging you to really listen to your deepest instincts when it comes to manifesting your decision making around all those areas. But the lunar eclipse, which occurs on the 28th, could be somewhat more challenging. And the reason for that is it's in the sign of Taurus. This is the last of the series of Scorpio-Taurus eclipses for now. And for you, this is house 6, so this is a much more practical location for an eclipse to occur, but the sun is in house 12. If there is any lack of support or perhaps loyalty around your professional or work situation, or you don't see yourself working in a particular company or job or role for the long term, this combination of eclipses is really asking you to think very seriously about what would really meet your expectations. And sometimes in life we have to give something up in order to get something better, but the lunar eclipse could see you a little bit fearful to do that. It is a much more psychological influence that comes from the sun in Scorpio, so any anxieties or a lack of confidence could get in the way of really seizing the prize that the solar eclipse is urging you to go for. So you take those two energies into the first quarter of 2024. So you must really believe in yourself, listen to your instincts, but if something isn't working for the long term, it may be time to make a change. Now on the screen now, I'm sharing the chart wheel, the solar return for your sign. And you can see that you have a cluster of energy in the sign of Sagittarius, and including the gorgeous Venus. Now Venus is right up there on your first house cusp, and it's going to come back into your sign later in the year. So you're going to have two opportunities to really dazzle people with your personal charisma, but also the way you present yourself. So don't be surprised if you go through a few changes in terms of hair, your clothing, and your mode of being in 2024. But of course Venus can also be about money, and I think being in your sign, Venus is encouraging you to embrace your creativity and talents, so that again can feed into any decisions you make around work. But you can also see that Mercury is in your sign and very close to Mars. Now that combination is quite powerful, and in the first house, because Mars, through its rulership of Aries, is a very first house type of influence anyway, could give you a lot of thrust and urgency to express your ideas throughout this year. The catch is that RX, that means retrograde. So Mercury is retrograde, as I mentioned before, right at the start of the year. Now that doesn't mean to say that you're going to have misfortune in 2024, but it does mean that your thinking could at times be pretty fluid. Now, because you're a mutable sign, nothing new there, and also because sometimes when things don't work out for you, you have an innate ability to dust yourself down and go again, and not spend too much time navel gazing, which can be what other zodiac signs do. But just remember, Saturn and Neptune are actually asking you to get more in touch with your emotions. And because Saturn applies to Venus and Neptune applies to Mars and Mercury, both in squares, they are in your sector of your feelings, your home situation, your emotion. So there could be some extra responsibilities that you find this year. Maybe it's going to be with children. Could be that you're going to be doing some kind of upgrade to a property. Perhaps there's going to be some extra activity around your home in terms of people visiting. It may be that someone older in your family needs more support. But Saturn applying to Venus means that when you try to do something that's different and perhaps more creative, you have to think about the impact it will have on your emotional situation, and perhaps also the people around you. So there is the potential for a little bit of inhibition in terms of expressing your talents, but also really feeling good about yourself in terms of your allure. So what Saturn does is just cools down Venus's charm somewhat. What Neptune does is in some ways perhaps distorts or exhausts some of the drive and passion of Mars, but it can also see the information that you may need to exchange this year, along with that Mercury retrograde. At times there could be confusion, and it could be around a property matter, or it could be around your family situation or emotions that you will have to work hard to keep things clear. Now, in any natal horoscope, the most influential player is the planet right at the top of the chart, and you can see it is the moon up there in the 10th house. And when the moon is in the 10th house, it's much more difficult to disguise how we feel. But also it's in the sign of Virgo, which can be a little bit of a perfectionist influence. And maybe when it comes to your professional situation, because the moon in the 10th house is going to have that much more impact, maybe working with people that you don't necessarily find easy, or who don't understand some of the responsibilities and obligations you may have, could see you having to work hard at that classic work-life balance scenario. So using your talents, your creativity, and of course your personality, with all those influences in the first house, gives you a wonderful opportunity this year. But you do have to balance it with the limitations of Saturn and the emotions of the moon, which suggests that yours could be a little bit closer to the surface this year. But there is a glorious grand Earth Trine in this chart, and it goes between your ruler Jupiter, which you can see is in house 6 and is going to be reinforcing your physical vitality and can give you a lot of support to get the type of role in life you feel you really deserve. But that's linking marvellously to the moon, and both then link back to the sun in Capricorn. Now there's about a 4-degree gap through to the sun, but the moon and Jupiter are almost perfectly aligned in a 120 trine, which is one of the most enabling angles in astrology. So that's gorgeous. But what does this mean for you? Well, let's look at the zodiac signs that they're in. So the sign of Capricorn is very much about tradition, the establishment, playing a little bit more by the rules. And for you, it's in house 2, so it's your everyday resources. But the link between the sun and Jupiter is one of the most fortunate in astrology, and that's in house 6. And then they both feed through to the moon in house 10. So what I would say is, if you take an earthy approach, because of the 3 positions all being in earth signs, but think about resources in terms of the sun, hard work and application in terms of Jupiter, and just understanding that there may be some expectations that come with the moon, but if you can just flex into those deal with people in positions of influence, understand where they're coming from. Even if you can be a little bit of a natural rule breaker at times, if you really want to make it all the way to the boardroom, you're going to take a little bit more of a conventional approach and then feed in your more creative and talented and visionary ideas. Now, the other thing to share about this solar return is the placement of the midpoint. For everyone, it's in Scorpio, it's at 8 degrees, but it is in the 12th house. The midpoint between the sun and the moon is the balance of the drive and passion of the sun and the more receptive, protective and nurturing energies of the moon. And that suggests that at times this year you will want to withdraw a little bit and just have some moments of complete peace and tranquility, but there's nothing wrong with that at all. And if you are someone who has a lot of psychological insights, your gift in that regard is really boosted. And if you look across the chart from that midpoint at 8 degrees in the sign of Scorpio to where Jupiter, your ruler, is, it's nearly exactly opposite. So it suggests that those instincts that you have and the ability to understand other people could prove to be very lucky for you this year. So there is the outer world, the more practical material world, that's boosted hugely by that grand Earth Trine, suggesting that you are going to be successful around resources this year, work and business. But the energy in your sign suggests you will want to do it on your terms, but what you're being told is you will have to compromise a little bit in terms of what the needs of your family or home life is, and also the needs and expectations of people that you meet through your work. So you can see that the solar eclipse of the 14th of October and the more psychological energy of the sun and the Taurus practical eclipse at the end of October are feeding into this chart too, so especially through the role of your midpoint. So there's a lot of success for you to have, but you're going to need to channel your passion. Mars and Mercury in a conjunction, but Mercury in retrograde, and of course it's detrimented in your sign. You need to channel your passion in a way which is a bit more practical this year in order to really make the progress. But because the Libran solar eclipse is asking you to really go for what feels right in terms of the more idealistic side of your nature, you may have to temper that a little bit. Or if you want to go with it, just understand that it may be better to follow your own path. So that could be through self-employment rather than working for a big, unyielding organisation which has quite set expectations of how it goes about things. So the great news, Sagittarius, is as you step into January, so Mercury goes direct on the 2nd. Now, of course, it will be in its post-retrograde shadow still, but there's a really exciting event coming on the 21st because Pluto returns back to the sign of Aquarius. But the big significance about this is that when Pluto was originally discovered, they thought it was on the 8th of February. Then sometime after that, they were studying the plates from the photography from space and realised that actually Pluto was discovered on the 21st of January. So there's a weird synchronicity here that it returns this year for longer than 30 weeks, about 38 weeks, on the day that it was discovered, so on its birthday. And on that day, so the sun also returns to the sign of Aquarius. Now for you, this gives you a fantastic opportunity to express your ideas in a very passionate way over the next year. But of course the 3rd house is also what we believe. And those belief systems are something that for you are often changing because you have such an amazing curiosity. So you're always downloading information of one sort or another, but the chances are that some of your outlook, perhaps some of the structures that were put into your thinking when you were quite young, because Pluto works so deep and is so transformational, can actually start to alter over the next few years in quite a significant way. Now, the third house can also be your connections with your community, with siblings, and also your neighborhood. So a lot more intensity around those areas, but the potential for a lot of growth too. Now that brings us to the end of February, and we get that combination between the North Node and Chiron in the 5th house. If you don't have a significant romantic relationship in your life, and that is something you really yearn for, or you'd really like to have children, or you feel that your life does lack a little bit of social interaction, perhaps has been really affected by COVID, and of course with Saturn over the last year, and before that since 2012, Neptune in the 4th house, those influences have been more inward and perhaps also stolen a little bit of energy and confidence, may I say, at times. But having this combination between the North Node and Chiron is a big boost to think about those areas and set your intentions in a very positive way for what can come for the rest of this year, because there's lots of really brilliant things to come in the rest of this year for you. And that brings us to the 25th of March, because then we do have the lunar eclipse, which is a reflection back to the solar eclipse which occurred on the 14th of October. So it's still in Libra, but this time it's the moon, whereas before it was the sun. So this could bring into the open a bit more some of the friendships or alliances that are in your life that perhaps are a little bit out of kilter. So for example, if you're investing a lot of time and effort into a hobby or an interest which has lost its sparkle a little bit, this could be a good time for a review. Then again, it could be that if a romantic relationship isn't quite aligning for your future hopes, the energy of Libra, in the way that you want, that can be food for thought. But good things are coming, because the solar eclipse, which occurs on the 8th of April, is pretty close to Mercury, even though Mercury is in a retrograde by this time. And that over the next 6 months is going to rekindle your passion to go for what's right for you. Because the 5th house is to do with our individual expression, the 11th house is to do with our connections, but also the expectations other people can have for us. And it's important to be mindful of other people's needs, but not to the point that we drown out our desires. So that's what the solar eclipse in your sister fire sign of the 8th of April is really giving you an enormous platform to springboard forwards from in a very positive way. Now, when it comes to love, romance and play, with Mercury, it does go into the second of its fire retrogrades. But first of all, it moves into your sister fire sign of Aries for 10 weeks, from the 10th of March through to the 15th of May. But what happens is that Mercury goes retrograde on the 1st of April through to the 25th of April. So that obviously coincides with that solar eclipse. So when it comes to your interests, manifesting your talents, those hopes around romance, perhaps even about children, the possibility is, with Mercury in a retrograde quite close, usually when we have an eclipse, planets need to be within 1 or 2 degrees. Mercury is actually about 5 degrees away. So it just suggests that there could be some changes of plan within the next or the following 6 months. But as long as you just bear that in mind, that this is a year when being flexible is going to be important around what you're passionate about, then you can use that really redoubtable side of your nature when things don't always work out. As I said before, you can dust yourself down and go again, probably more than any other zodiac sign. But you have more, because Venus, the planet of love and affection, is in your 5th house, the same position as the eclipse and the nodal North Node axis, and also Chiron, from the 5th of April to the 28th of April. So the retrograde could be a rethink, but also a reset around some of those big hopes. But then Mars, hustle bustle Mars, moves into your 5th house. Brilliant for your sense of attraction and your sense of allure from the 1st of May through to the 9th of June. Absolutely fantastic, this set of influences. And then you also have, on the 23rd of May, a beautiful conjunction between Venus and your ruling planet of Jupiter. If you are applying for jobs, around about that time, the last week of May could prove to be very fortuitous. Or if you're someone who provides a service, it could be that the mixture of your ability, your ideas, the innovation that you're bringing through Uranus also being in the 6th house, but also your innate way of coming across is going to be really at a heightened point of vibrancy. Those are the 2 planets of fortune in traditional astrology. Venus, the lesser benefit, your ruler, Jupiter, the greater benefit. So some real good news stuff coming through towards the end of May. But then Jupiter moves on the 26th of May into your sector of relating for the rest of the year. But also Venus moves into that location from the 24th of May through to the 17th of June. This is really great stuff, Sagittarius. I think if you followed me for some while, you know that I try to keep it real. So I'm not just saying these things. And also Mars is going to be moving into your 7th house from the 21st of July to the 5th of September. Now the 7th house with Mars can be quite robust, but it's good for setting our boundaries. And if you do need to compete or, come into contact with people in a competitive environment through your work, perhaps even a sport, that's going to be helpful. But if you are still waiting for something to flow in terms of your love life, Mars is going to give you much more grit and much more desire to go for what you need. But there's so much good stuff coming for you through both the 5th house of romance, sociability, personal expression, and the 7th house of relating. So really great stuff. Having Jupiter in that location from the 26th of May through to the following year for a year. This only happens once every 12 years. So it's an opportunity to demonstrate the best of yourself. We all have parts of ourselves that we might struggle with a little bit more. But Jupiter in the 7th house can see you coming across in a very upbeat, exuberant, positive, engaging way. And with Venus in the mix as well, quite a lot of charm as well. So really does look very, very hopeful for relationships of all kinds, but also for your love life or your hopes in terms of your creative talents or perhaps even children. Now, in terms of travel plans and career, July, August and September is really interesting because Mercury makes its way through your sister fire sign of Leo, and it's going to be there from the 2nd of July through to the 25th, but then it moves into Virgo, but then it goes into a retrograde on August the 5th in Virgo. Now for you, that's your 10th house, which is to do with jobs, interviews, presentations. So there could be a few weeks here when things seem to be a bit stuck and inhibited. There may be something around a contractual dispute that happens through the summer months that could prove frustrating. Maybe somebody's not necessarily going to be as straightforward and fair as you would like. So you need to keep your wits about you. But then Mercury retreats back into Leo from August the 15th, but it goes direct on August the 28th. So in the 9th house, that could be when you're discussing things with a legal advisor, or some travel plans may get stuck or changed. But then it moves back into the sign of Virgo, your 10th house, on September the 9th. And through to the 26th of September, that can be a time when you really clarify some of the things that maybe got a bit bogged down, stuck, misunderstood. And remember, that can be a little bit of a theme of this year because of all the fiery Mercury retrogrades, and 2 of which in your sign. But in terms of your personal style, attractiveness, and drawing admirers to you, Venus moves into your sign from the 18th of October to the 12th of November. You may, because you have this at the start of the year, give yourself another glamorous makeover. But don't be surprised if more than one person beats a path to your door. You're going to be in demand this year, I really believe that. But Mercury does move back into Sagittarius on the 2nd of November, and then it goes back into a retrograde from the 26th of November to the middle of December. And because for you, this is your first house, it may be something that's been important to you that you set your sights on right at the start of the year. When you look back on it, it may not have panned out exactly as you first hoped or expected. But you know, I feel actually, because you're almost having a repeat of the same scenario, this time round, you'll be really attuned to what the delay is, and it's possibly more to do with you than anyone else. It may be because you're deciding to refocus your desires and actions and thinking, Mercury, in a bit of a different way to what you were earlier in the year, but not a bad way. You're just reapplying the experiences that you've gained throughout the year to make sure that the track that you're on is the right track. But what about the home and emotions? Now, obviously, having Neptune and Saturn, in the 4th house can be quite tough, especially when they go into a retrograde. So Neptune's retrograde from the 2nd of July, 7th of December. But I think the critical one for you is Saturn retrograde 29th of June through to the 15th of November. So you can see that it's more in the second half of the year. There could be a little bit of frustration if you're having some home improvements done. Maybe some tradespeople will be lacking in reliability. Maybe you're waiting for materials to turn up, or if you're trying to move, it can seem that things aren't quite falling into place at quite the pace you want. But one of the things I love about Saturn and Neptune being in your 4th house, and I do have Mars and also Saturn in Sagittarius, so I'm a pretty Sagittarius person. Mars in Sagittarius is, you know, very much into athletics, freedom, adventure, being very independent. So I really get that side of your nature. But remember what I said earlier about being very redoubtable. So when things don't work out for archers, you have an ability to get up, dust yourself down, and go again like no other sign. But if you've joined me over quite some time, you'll know that I think what happens with Sagittarius is that relentless redoubtability can see you move forwards without fully integrating some of the emotional dimension of the experiences you have. So what Saturn's doing over the next couple of years for you is really asking you to take the time to stop, grieve around sad things. If things don't always work out, give yourself permission at times to feel a little bit more vulnerable. Share how you feel to people you can really trust. Build up the foundations of your world, the 4th house, and the protectiveness, the 4th house, in a very structured way, Saturn. Work with Saturn. Don't see it as a blight, because I feel that some of the other astrologers on YouTube particularly will be full of woe about Saturn in your 4th house. See it as an opportunity. Yes, it does square Venus in your sign at the start of the year. Yes, it is in opposition to the moon at the start of the year, and that is something you do need to be mindful of. In other words, you're not going to get it all on your own terms, but if you can work to integrate your emotional being, that's going to be one of the amazing themes of this year. And remember, the earth structure of your chart at the start of the year gives you a wonderful opportunity to find success. You just need to decide whether you want to follow your own instincts and your own path and go the more original route, which could be a little more challenging, or adhere to the structures and expectations of a bigger business, a bigger family, and go that route, and that will, I feel, be less attritional, but the choice is yours. So the Mercury retrogrades are really just rethinking how you can be passionate, and that collection of eclipses, which on the 18th of September sees a very emotional one in the sign of Pisces. This is a new eclipse axis between Virgo and Pisces, but for you it's very close to Neptune, so a lot of emotion could come from that. Don't deny it. But then the solar eclipse back in your sector of the future on the 2nd of October is very close to Mercury in Libra, but it's not in retrograde. So despite Mercury going into retrograde in your sign at the end of the year, I actually feel as long as you can integrate your longer term expectations with the more sensitive part of your nature, which Saturn and Neptune are urging you to do, you really are going to end this year in a much stronger position with huge gains possible around your love life, sociability, the things you feel really passionate about, but also I think the physical world in terms of your resources can build up in a very positive way too. Now finally, I just need to tell you about your personal new moon, which occurs on the 12th of December. Now that does square up to Neptune, rather like Neptune squared up to Mars and Mercury at the start of the year. But it's just saying to you, Sagittarius, keep being inclusive about your feelings, but keep your eye on the target too. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Sagittarius. Thank you so much for joining me. Wishing you all the best for year 2024. Please like, share, comment or subscribe.